I think we all have stories we remember from our childhood that help shape us into who we are. I'm going to share just a little bit of one of those stories. When I was a little boy, I would sing with my mother. Now, we sang a few songs together, and one of the songs we sang had a second verse that spoke of one of the stories of Jesus. This story of Jesus is one that stayed with me now for nearly 30 years. You see, whenever I got old enough, I started memorizing John chapter 4 and the story of Jesus encountering a Samaritan woman at a water well. That story I would tell before we would sing the second verse of that song. And I think because I had put it into my heart and my memory so long ago, it influences me even more today. You see, there was a time in Jesus' ministry when it was just getting started, and John 4 records that it was becoming known that Jesus was baptizing more believers than John the Baptist. And to kind of stay under the radar, Jesus heads north to go to Galilee. Now, to get to Galilee, he had to pass through Samaria, and specifically, he stopped at a water well, a well that was given to Joseph by his father Jacob. That is where our story occurs. You see, while Jesus stopped to rest, the disciples went to get something to eat. And while Jesus was sitting there, along came a Samaritan woman. It was about high noon, about the time that I'm talking to you now. She came up with her water pot, came to the well, and Jesus asked her directly, "Give me a drink." Well, she looked at Jesus. She saw that he was wearing the traditional attire of a rabbi, and she asked him a question back. "How is it that you, being a Jew, would ask a drink of me, who is a woman of Samaria?" Jesus said to her something that reminds me of some of our movie plots, if you don't mind me saying so. Because you ever have those movies you're watching and you know the character and you know their ability, and when someone does something you think to yourself, oh, they just don't know who they're dealing with? Jesus' response kind of reminds us of that. He said, if you knew who it was who was asking of you a drink, then you would have asked of him and he would have given you living water. Well, this was interesting to this woman. She looked at him, probably shrugged her shoulders a bit, maybe even sneered a tiny bit, and said, "You don't have a bucket or a water pot. You have nothing to draw with, and this well is deep. So where are you going to get this living water from, Rabbi man?" Well, she didn't say Rabbi man, but you get the idea. She goes on, "Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us this well and drank from it himself and his children and his cattle?" Jesus, unperturbed, continues, "Whoever drinks from this water will thirst again," he said. "But whoever drinks from the water that I shall give him, they shall never thirst, for within them shall come a well of water, springing up into everlasting life." Well, this gets the woman's interest. She says, "Well, tell me about this water then. Tell me how it can be that I don't have to come down to this well every day. That would be terrific." Jesus said, "Go call your husband and bring him here." She looks at him. She answers back, "I don't have a husband." Jesus said, "You've told me the truth, saying that you don't have a husband, because in truth you've had 5 husbands, and the man you have now is not your husband." This shocks the woman. She's kind of thrown back. She doesn't know quite what to do, so she changes the subject. She says, "Look, my ancestors, we worshipped on this mountain. You Jews say that you worship at Jerusalem. What about that? What do you think of that? Jesus said to her, "A day is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers of God will not worship him on this mountain or even in Jerusalem. The true worshipers of God will worship him in spirit and in truth." Now this is an interesting answer, but you got to know at least a little bit of the background. When the temple was being rebuilt in Jerusalem, the Samaritans wanted to help. They wanted to help provide financial support. They wanted to provide building and skill support, but they weren't permitted to because Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. It goes back hundreds of years, and it's a feud that had lasted for so long, I wonder if everyone even knew why anymore. So for her to have that statement and then him to answer back opened a door for a new conversation. She said to him, revealing her faith, "I know one is coming, who is the Christ. When he comes, he will make all things known to us." Now, she doesn't realize she's about to have one of the coolest secrets revealed to her ever. It's better than looking behind Peter Parker's mask of Spider-Man. It's better than seeing the glasses glow on Clark Kent's face. I picture Jesus leaning forward to her, drawing near and saying to her, "I who speak to you am he." Now before you know it, it's just Jesus, a water pot, sitting at Jacob's well. The woman has left. She has run into the village, and she's telling all the men of the village, "Come and meet the man who told me everything about my past." In the meantime, Jesus' disciples have returned, and they've returned with food. They offer Jesus some food, saying, "Go ahead and eat, Lord." And he said, "I've had food that you don't know about." Now they start murmuring amongst themselves because they know good and well that there's no pizza delivery guy showing up at Jacob's well. So I wonder what kind of conversation further they were having. And Jesus sees this as a teaching moment. In this teaching moment, Jesus tells them, look, you know how it is with farming. In farming, you say to one another, in 4 months, there will be a harvest. Well, I tell you the truth, the fields are white unto harvest now. I picture in that moment that the men of the village have been drawing nearer and nearer, and at this point Jesus could wave his hand, and the disciples following his hand would see the men of the village of Sychar coming to meet him, and that the fields white unto harvest were people to be reached for God's kingdom. When the men got to Jesus, they asked if he would stay with them, and he did for 2 more days. While he was there, many came to believe that he was indeed the Christ. They came up to the woman, and they said to her, "It is no longer because of what you said that we believe, for now we know for ourselves that this one is a Savior of the world." I love that story. Well, the reason why I talked to you about it today, in this time and in this place, was that I actually wanted to be at a water well when telling this story. Now, we don't use water wells in the same way that Jesus and the Samaritan woman did in this story, but we do use water wells a lot. And throughout our towns and villages and cities and rural communities, we have all sorts of water wells. Many of them like the one I'm at today. I want you to see this water well. Look with me, will you? This particular well serves a small village in southern Ohio. The view is quite dramatic. I couldn't help but wonder, while considering the water wells we all have in our communities, what what if each time we saw one of these wells, we would be mindful that the fields are still white unto harvest. There are still people who need to know that there is a Savior in the world, and we get to be the ones who share that good news. Sometimes I think we forget about that, and so I hope that when we see these reminders jutting out of the earth, providing water for hundreds, maybe thousands of people at a time, maybe we can remember that we get to offer living water to hundreds, maybe thousands of people at a time, but it may be just one. You see, Jesus was on his way to Galilee, and he just happened upon this Samaritan woman at a well in a conversation along the journey. As we go and make disciples, let's make sure we don't forget to pay attention to the conversations we have on the way to going and making disciples, because we never know how many lives will be touched from one conversation. No matter how big or how small our village or city or community is, we still get to tell a message that is powerful, that is appropriate even today. That message, of course, is Christ is here. Come and drink.